Alright, while I'm taking roll, I would love you guys to mix up a brown and paint it all over your canvas. Your canvas this is going to be your first canvas painting, so hopefully you've got your canvas and you're ready to go. So, brown is red, yellow, and black here, and then I'm adding water because I am going to wash this over the entire canvas. I'm not going to leave any white showing, no little white dots, no little white specks. And at the end, you're going to see I kind of just brush it while it's wet, and I'm trying to work real quickly using the biggest brush I have. And I am going to kind of brush back and forth and up and down with big fast strokes, and that is going to allow me to kind of smooth some of this out. But don't be too concerned with anything other than really covering the whole thing, because we are going to paint over all of this. This is kind of just our base, and it may show through here and there, and it will just help our painting look more finished in the long run. When you are painting this, do not paint it too dark. Make sure you're using the water to thin it down, because we want to be able to see what we're doing on top of this. This will be a no-draw painting, so you will just build the entire painting out of paint. So no pencils or I'll take points off. So just go to town and get the whole thing covered. And do that right now while I'm taking the roll. Okay, I've painted it brown. It's dry now. And I'm looking at my photograph, and I'm going to just think about the spaces here and here and the size of the head. And I'm going to make sure that on my canvas, my picture takes up all that space. Notice the angle of the head tilt, super important. I want to just make sure that angle is represented in my painting, not straight up and down, but at an angle because her head is tilted. I also noticed that her face kind of follows that tilt. So if I don't get that tilt right, I'm going to kind of mess up the whole thing. One of the first things I'm going to do is break my picture down into quarters. So I'm going to measure from the top and the bottom of the actual photograph, not the paper. I'm going to find the halfway point, and I'm just eyeballing it and find the halfway point between there. And so I've got it broken into 4 different parts. Doing that on the bottom. Now I could do this just straight away on the canvas, but I've got a little bit of a problem. on the canvas and my photo aren't the same proportion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this photo and I'm going to line it up on the corner, but not the paper, the actual photograph. So I'm going to start with a decent sized brush, nothing too big, nothing too small. I'm not doing anything fine-tuned, and I want it to hold enough paint that it'll move quickly. So here I go, lining up the corner of the photograph to the corner of my canvas, making sure it's square. Not using the paper, but using the photograph. And this is not very technical what I'm doing. If I had a big yardstick or I wanted to do that, I could do that. But I am going to run an imaginary line through the corner, the bottom left corner of the photograph, through the top right corner of the photograph, and see where that hits. So here I go. There's my imaginary line. It hits about there. So I'm going to use that to determine the top for my proportions. Everything above that is just, I'm just going to finish the background that way. So my halfway point is going to be between there and the bottom, and then I'm going to do the halfway points here. I am standing up right now so I could really see the spacing. You see I miss it there. The further away it is from you, the harder it is to get the spacing right. So I'm going to do the bottom. None of the side is getting cropped, so the bottom is just broken into quarters. Seeing where the chin lines up according to that quarter mark. Seeing where the top of the head lines up according to those quarter marks. And here I actually, in a minute, I continue that whole line. There it goes. I continue that whole line so I know to ignore that part of the picture. So the space between that line and the top of the head will represent the space in the photograph. I still need to paint it, but when I do the background, I'll paint it. Using a straight line to help me really get that head tilt angle correct. I remember when I laid down the marker, putting a straight next to it really helped me understand what that angle was going to look like. Again, I'm not getting tied up. I'm not being careful. Just kind of roughing in where the eye placement goes. How does the eye line up with this quarter hash? Remember, if I'm looking straight at someone, there's pretty much an eye space between both eyes. That's an important distinction. Figuring out where, according to that hash mark, my chin should go and my lips. I will be revising this over and over and over. Some of you who watched me work on the still life, you could see I painted the same areas over and over. So right now, I'm not getting hung up. I'm not moving slow. I notice that if I follow that angle of the center line, how my nostril and my eye kind of line up together. And I'm really just using those things to help me find the hairline, to see where it turns, to see how close it comes to the eyebrow. I'm not drawing a face. I'm drawing shapes and colors. So I really want to think about how these shapes and colors they do make a face, but if I paint those shapes and colors, that's how I'm going to get the most realistic painting of my subject matter. If I try and imagine, that it's a face with eyes and a nose, I'm going to revert to some of the ways that I rendered those things when I was a little kid. Really simplified and symbolic. What I want to do is I want to paint things the way they really look. So I've got to really observe, where does the hair line up on that mark? And that's going to help me understand what I'm painting better, and it's going to help me be more successful. If I just try and paint this as a face, it's going to look a little cartoony. Even with me having experience painting faces, it'll look a little less cartoony than yours, possibly, but it still won't be as accurate as it could be if I really just look at that photograph and draw the shapes and the colors that I see. Continuing to lay this out, reshaping, resizing the eyes some as I go. You guys should be working on this now. Remember what I told you before? Sometimes when you have a sophisticated curve, the best thing to do is to break it into straight parts of the curve and then smooth them down together so that your curve has the sophistication. So you'll see a lot of my marks, I break curves into pieces so I don't have just like a consistent arc around here, which would just be an arc is just part of a circle. So it's an even curve. These curves, they flow one way, they change direction, they flatten off. I want to look for those things in my photograph, and I want to put those things into my painting. Checking my quarter marks again, being real careful to line everything right. So that's her arm, her far arm. I just see the smallest sliver of it. She's turned away. I'm fairly close with the camera. So her arm is much further from the camera than her head as a percentage of total distance. So there's going to be a lot of foreshortening, a lot of reduction in size between her head and her arm. I'm going to drop in a little iris just to kind of get a feel for it. I realize I made her eyes smaller. I need to make her nose smaller. I need to make sure everything's kind of lined up and correct. Here I start to actually shade in the dark side of her face, trying to water the black down even more so that I can really see what I'm doing. I realized the eye had to come closer. If I was going to make them smaller, I had too much space between the eyes. So now by making the eyes smaller, I had to kind of revise the hairline and everything and checking to see that that makes sense, that my observation to make it smaller and move it fit what I was seeing with the guideline there. Constantly reshaping, looking, seeing new things, painting those new things. Now here you see me kind of laying in the shadows with a real watery black. Once that sheen comes off and the whole thing dries, you can see it better. At the end, I will show that to you. But now I'm going to go through and really pay attention to the light and how the light is built on this face. Again, you should be doing this while the video is playing. You can glance up every once in a while, but I want you to kind of follow along and do it while it's going. Trying to understand how to sketch your picture out using watered down paint. I'm not using thick paint at all here. It's all watered down. The lines are a little less watered down than the hair, but they're still watered down because I want to get that flow and that movement. Building up layers of paint. This is just an underpainting now. So first I kind of tinted my canvas, and now I'm kind of sketching with paint, and then I'll start laying in possibly some other middle tones, and this is all part of the underpainting process. Until I start painting the final layer, this is all kind of just like getting it to a place where the painting's ready to go. If I have a successful underpainting, I will probably have a successful painting. If I start out now bad, it's probably not going to be that successful in the long run. Okay, I pretty much got the layout and the black done to a sufficient level that I like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to water down some white, and I'm going to start laying in some of the real highlights and reshaping. This whole thing is about big detail or big generalized areas of color, big generalized concepts of light and shadow, no detail until you've really laid all that stuff out and figured it out. So here I am continuously revising. Everything here is going to get painted over, possibly multiple times, as I revise this and see things that I didn't see before, and I'm continuously changing this and developing it. Some of you guys, you just do like one pass of color and you think you're done, and you turn it in and it's not sufficient. You've not sufficiently investigated, and there hasn't been a sufficient amount of work. You really need to push yourself to develop these paintings beyond that simple idea and the basics, and keep working it. So part of our process is we're going to build up these lights and darks, then we're going to build on top of that, then we're going to start getting into like really fine detail. I'm not concerned if my eye is perfect. If it's a general shape I can work with, that's great. I'm not too concerned if I have everything exactly where it should be, but I'm trying to figure that out. But later on, I will have a chance to repaint it and rebuild some of those areas. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just, every chance I get, re-looking at the picture, revising. I'm not filling in my drawing with paint. I'm repainting on top so that I can really capture some of the things I'm looking for. All right, here you can see I kind of laid it all out. I even went in with a little bit of white and kind of brought out some of the highlights. Again, watered down, not going too nuts. Uh, all of this will get painted over. Every inch of this canvas is going to get painted over again pretty much. So this is just my underpainting, my plan, what I'm working from. I've got the major light and a major dark area considered. I took a good picture because it has a clear light and dark side. It helps me get dimension in my painting as I move forward. And I expect you guys to be somewhere similar to this by the end of class. So again, I waited for it to dry so some of the sheen came off of it because there's a lot of reflection when the painting is wet. No real detail, kind of rough strokes. Everything's just kind of laid out real rough. I will get in there gentle and start doing the details later, but I don't want to commit to any detail until I'm sure that the size and the placement is right. And it's still, may have some fine tuning to go. So I'm going to really look at my picture, think about my picture, observe my picture, and then use that to create my plan to get started. I will probably start laying in the eyes in that blue-gray color sooner than later. I have a lot of dramatic light in mind, so when I lay them in, they're going to be a little darker and a little grayer, a little less blue than it was in our sample, because you could see in the inside corner there shouldn't even be light here. This is all shadow in the actual photograph. I don't know, I put a little white there, but it should be dark, and all this is dark in here, and it's fairly dark. So I've got to keep that theme going of light, because that's what we see in this. You could also see I kind of left my marks. That's fine. Those may help me later. But as I refine this, I'll start taking those out of the background. And, the background will start to take on some shape and color when I get to that point. Okay, so I expect you to be here by the end of class today. If you don't get here during class, I expect you to work on this outside of class and turn this in before the end of the day. Good luck.